Right now, as you're watching this, ships moving through the most important oil choke point on Earth are paying tolls to Iran in Chinese yuan, not US dollars. Let that sink in for a second. After 2 decades of sanctions, after a war that was supposed to end the regime in Tehran, Iran isn't just standing. It's collecting money from the global oil trade in Beijing's currency. And the man who predicted all of this, retired Colonel Douglas Macgregor, former senior advisor to the U.S. Defense Secretary in Trump's first term. He just said something that's making Washington sweat. He said Iran defeated the United States and Israel, full stop. This is the story of how America's biggest Middle East gamble in 20 years collapsed in 10 weeks, and why your petrol bill, your mortgage, and your super fund are all wearing the cost. You felt this one at the Bowser already. Petrol above $2.10 a liter. Diesel cracked $3. Tradies got crucified. Families changed their shopping habits. That wasn't bad luck. That was the Strait of Hormuz shutting down, because America and Israel rolled the dice on regime change in Iran and lost. And here's what the Albanese government isn't shouting about. The Guardian Australia reported on the 12th of May that Treasury reckons this war could push us to the edge of recession. The federal budget got revised up $1.6 billion in petroleum tax receipts over 5 years. Read that again. Canberra is literally banking on this war dragging on. So while you're paying more at the pump, the government's pocketing the difference. Mortgage holders, that's about 37% of Aussie households. You're stuck with higher rates for longer because the RBA can't cut while oil's this volatile. This isn't a war happening over there. It's a war happening to your wallet, and almost nobody in mainstream media is connecting those dots. Let's rewind. February 28, 2026. The United States and Israel were sitting at the negotiating table with Iran. Nuclear talks, diplomats in suits, Trump's envoys shuttling between capitals. Everyone thought there was a deal coming. Then boom. Surprise airstrikes out of nowhere. The targets weren't just military. They killed Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. They killed Ali Larijani, one of the most senior figures in the regime, and the official line from the Trump administration kept changing. First it was about nukes, then missiles, then regime change, then oil. Pick a reason, they tried them all. Here's the problem. The IAEA, the UN's own nuclear watchdog, said before the war that there was no evidence Iran had an active nuclear weapons program. None. The entire pretext for the strike. It was already crumbling on day one. Iran didn't fold. They retaliated within hours. Drones, ballistic missiles, the lot. They hit 17 U.S. military bases across Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. 15 American soldiers killed, 538 wounded. That's the worst U.S. military losses in the Middle East since the Iraq invasion in 2003. And then Iran did something nobody in Washington had planned for. They closed the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's oil, a third of seaborne LNG, just shut to 500 million barrels of crude, backed up behind a maritime traffic jam. Brent crude spiked to around $175 a barrel. In inflation-adjusted terms, we hadn't seen anything like it since the 1970s. The Pentagon's response, they've already burned through $18 billion. Then they went back and asked Congress for another $200 billion. With a B, Iran reopened the strait on their terms. They're now charging shipping tolls, and they're collecting those tolls in Chinese yuan. Think about what that means. The petrodollar, the entire foundation of American financial dominance since the 1970s, just had a hole punched through it by Iran with Beijing's currency. While the U.S. Navy watched from the sidelines, then comes the betrayal. Late March, Reuters reveals that Saudi Arabia, supposedly America's closest Arab ally, had been quietly launching their own airstrikes on Iran, helping the war effort in secret. 6 weeks later, MBS turns around and vetoes Trump's plan to escort ships through the strait. The plan was called Project Freedom. It lasted about a week before the Saudis killed it. A Pakistani-brokered ceasefire got signed on April 8th. By early May, Trump was telling Fox News the ceasefire was on life support. Channel 4 News, on May 7th, put it bluntly, quote, "It looks like a big failure of alliance management." That's diplomatic language for America's empire just got publicly humiliated. So how did the players react? Let's start with Douglas Macgregor, because his read on this is the one Washington doesn't want you to hear. On Judge Napolitano's show in May, Macgregor said, direct, quote, "Iran defeated the United States and Israel." He didn't hedge. He didn't note soften it. He said the war destroyed NATO, Gulf states, Israel, and the U.S. empire. And he warned, and this is the bit that should make you sit up, there's a real danger that Israel will use a nuke. Now, Macgregor isn't some random commentator. He served as senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense under Trump. He's not a peacenik. He's a retired colonel with combat experience. When a guy like that says the empire's broken, you've listened his take on Netanyahu. Quote, "Netanyahu is dragging the United States into war." End quote. Then Netanyahu did something that genuinely shocked Israel watchers. On the 12th of May, he announced Israel should phase out U.S. military assistance over the next decade. Stop and think about that. America has given Israel $174 billion in bilateral aid over the years. Just this year, another $4 billion got allocated. And Netanyahu, Bibi, the guy who built his career on the U.S.-Israel alliance, says, thanks, but we're done. Why? Because he can read a poll. American public support for Israel is in freefall. Netanyahu's own coalition is moving to dissolve the Knesset. Prediction markets are pricing him out of power by end of 2026. At 52.5%, he's not declaring independence. He's preparing for abandonment. Trump himself is contradicting his own Pentagon. He claimed victory multiple times. He said Iranian leaders are going to fold. Then he paused to Project Freedom. Then the ceasefire he announced got described by him as life support. That's not strength. That's a man trying to manage a disaster in real time. And the UN Secretary General Guterres condemned the strikes. The UN Security Council passed Resolution 2817 condemning Iran's retaliatory strikes on Gulf states. But notice they didn't condemn the original American attack. The legal experts called the U.S. strikes illegal under American law. International law experts called them a violation of Iran's sovereignty. The whole architecture of the rules-based order just got mocked by the country that built it. Here's what mainstream media is not telling you. This isn't a story about battlefield losses, the bombs and the missile counts and the casualty numbers. That's the surface. The real story is about money and currency and who controls the global plumbing. For 50 years, the United States has had one unbreakable economic superpower, the petrodollar. Every barrel of oil sold globally got priced in US dollars. That's why the world holds American debt. That's why your super fund can buy US treasuries. That's why the dollar is the dollar. Iran just broke that. With Chinese yuan at the most important oil choke point on the planet, China, they didn't fire a single shot. They didn't lose a single soldier, and they just got handed yuan-denominated oil settlement on a silver platter. The Belt and Road just made deeper inroads into the Gulf, cheap Iranian crude flowing east. This is the geopolitical bargain of the century, and Beijing didn't even break a sweat. Russia's the other quiet winner. Every barrel of Gulf supply that's disrupted lifts Russian export revenue. The Kremlin's been funding Ukraine off the back of this war. And the third winner, American defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, RTX, that $200 billion Pentagon supplemental that's flowing straight into their pockets. The same companies that lobby Washington to keep these wars going. Funny how that works. The losers, ordinary Americans, ordinary Israelis, and let's be honest, ordinary Australians, paying for a war we didn't start. Here's my prediction. Based on the data, the ceasefire breaks down by mid-2026. Trump can't do a ground war, politically toxic, and the Pentagon knows it would be catastrophic. So he'll escalate the naval blockade instead. Netanyahu loses power before year's end. Saudi-Iran rapprochement deepens under Chinese mediation, and the petrodollar keeps bleeding from 1,000 small cuts. Macgregor's right. This isn't just a defeat. It's the end of something. So what does this mean for us, sitting here in Australia? First, your fuel costs are not coming down anytime soon. Westpac IQ modeling shows infrastructure damage in the Gulf lengthens the recovery. Sticky inflation. RBA rate cuts delayed. Mortgage stress continues. Second, your grocery bills. Channel 7 Sunrise reported during the Hormuz closure that we were facing potential food shortages because so much Australian logistics runs on diesel. Diesel goes up. Everything in your trolley goes up. Bread, milk, meat, the lot. Third, and this is the one nobody's talking about, AUKUS. B-roll, AUKUS announcement footage, Australian submarines. If America can manage its alliances in the Gulf, if Saudi Arabia, a country America's propped up for 50 years, will quietly stab Washington in the back over Iran, what makes us think the United States will show up for Australia in a conflict over Taiwan? Macgregor has already raised this question publicly. American alliance reliability is being tested in real time, and the results are not flattering. We're spending $368 billion on AUKUS submarines on the direct assumption that America has our back. That assumption just got a lot shakier. And finally, the Aussie LNG winners. Woodside, Santos. They've been printing money off this conflict, but the federal treasury's collecting an extra $1.6 billion in petroleum tax. That money's coming out of your pocket and into theirs. So next time a politician tells you the budget surplus is from responsible economic management, remember where it actually came from. You're not paying $2.10 at the Bowser because of bad luck. You're paying it because of choices made in Washington and Tel Aviv that benefit people who'll never know your name. Empires don't collapse in a single dramatic moment. They collapse in choices that seemed clever at the time, a surprise strike that was meant to end a regime, an ally that was meant to fall in line, a currency that was meant to dominate forever. Iran was supposed to break. It didn't. Saudi Arabia was supposed to follow orders. It didn't. The dollar was supposed to be unchallenged. It isn't. And the people paying for these miscalculations, the people footing the bill, are not the ones who made them. The bill goes to working families in Brisbane and Perth and Adelaide who are watching their petrol prices climb while their mortgage repayments stay punishing. Douglas Macgregor said something else worth remembering. He said, Israel is most secure when the U.S. relationship is at the nation-to-nation level, not between parties or individual personalities. That applies to us too. Whatever happens next, Australia needs to start thinking about Australia first, because the people running the empire we hitched our wagon to clearly aren't thinking about us. If you found this useful, the algorithm only shows this stuff to people who subscribe. So hit subscribe and I'll keep doing the research so you don't have to. Tell me in the comments, are you still confident in AUKUS after watching this? I read every reply. I'll see you in the next one.